What the is we doing? Go.
Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. Let's get a little shot in before we begin our
Sure.
dilemma. hmm That's strong. Oh God. Okay, so today we are touching on the health topic, and we're going to be looking at quote unquote the overweight dilemma. Um, so we just came up with this on the fly. All right, but it is a prevalent issue, specifically in like first world countries, right?
hmm
In America where we are, but throughout the world really, because it's a prevalent issue in like third world countries, right? Like it's not something that's just happening in one place, one localized place. It's everywhere. So we can start kind of just like, getting to the surface of things. Like, why is it the case that so many people are overweight nowadays, right? And again, we're not looking at it from the perspective of, from like politics, like, is it all right to be overweight or not? Just in general, like, why are people overweight?
hmm
Overweight or obese people have a tendency of having a lot of health complications, right? And we start looking at things like diabetes, high blood pressure, or there's so many different types of diseases. But in any case, being overweight generally leads to a lot of problems with your health. So, kind of from your perspective, right? Because I kind of have a little bit more background in this. Like, why do you think people are as overweight as they are now, or why are there so many of them?
All right. So, well, you know this, but a lot of people might not know this. I'm a big conspiracy theory guy. I like to watch conspiracy theories, but we're not gonna go in that route. Just an honest opinion about why people are overweight is way too comfortable. I think we're too comfortable, and also we have everything, especially in first world countries. We have a lot access to a lot of things very easily. I think that's kind of like the one thing that, like McDonald's is down the corner. Uh, you know, food, it's so accessible that you don't need to cook, go to the groceries and actually cook. So I think I attribute these two things to like the overweight. Um, we're too comfortable and it's too accessible, I think.
hmm
Because like, okay, so if we look back, like our primal ages, we had the need to go and hunt for food, right? And that was uncomfortable because you were not sitting at your desk, just Uber Eats. Nah, you actually had to go run and actually kill something and then cook it, and then you gotta save that. You gotta, how you say that? Like meal prep, like portion.
Divide it. Yeah, portion it, divide
Yeah,
it.
you gotta portion it. Yeah, you gotta make sure that everybody eats, everybody's well fed, but also eat last. And nowadays, with food down the corner, I think that's gone. Like you can get food within 10 minutes in like the front of your door, like literally. So I think
Mhm.
I attribute those things to this. But what about you?
Right. So that's definitely like the biggest thing, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, if you really want to go to like the very beginning of things, is like when we started domesticating animals.
Mm,
But realistically, like that's going really, really far back. Um, like again, we go back to the hunting and gathering days. Like we would only stay in one place simply because there was food there, right? Like there were animals to hunt. Once there were no animals, then you would move, and then you would keep doing that. Once
mhm,
we figured out how to domesticate animals and have like a bunch of chickens and cows and all that, then we just stayed in place. And then that kind of just began the, the concept of modern society. Like we can produce all of our food in one place, and then we can mass distribute it with different distribution methods. And then from there, people kind of can go to a supermarket where all the distribution of food goes there, and then you can just take it home with you. Now it's gotten so convenient that you can literally order your groceries on the phone, right? Or you can order whatever kind of whatever your favorite food is, you can order it on your phone and you have it in seconds or minutes, obviously. But um, so yeah, a lot of it begins with the fact that things are so accessible, right? Like you can literally get whatever you want whenever you want it.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, you don't have to work for it. So it's easy to get and you don't have to work for it. So that's just like the perfect combo just to make people significantly overweight because now they don't have to exercise, they don't have to move, they can just eat. And then for work, they sit all day. Most people, right? Unless you're working some sort of construction job or manual labor where you're forced to move. A majority of jobs just require you to be in one place. And again, there goes the situation of like a lot of energy is being consumed, not that much energy is being expended. Eventually, all that energy is going to be stored as fat.
Mm-hmm.
And then, boom, now you are in a society where at this, I mean, like last when I look at the statistic, it was like 70%, right? 70% of the American population was trending towards being overweight. And then about like 40 to 45% was obese. And that was, maybe like 2 years ago, maybe. I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure those numbers probably skew a little bit higher now. So, being that that's the case, like, is there anything that we can do? Not really. Just like in general, in terms of society, right? Like, we're not going to try to go backwards and try to force people to go hunting for food. That's not really going to work. One, that's going to reduce just overall economics trends. Like, we're not going to be able to do as much. Everything's going to be produced a lot slower. So, disregarding that, the next best option is to do things like going to the gym, right? And eating healthy and understanding why you're eating the things that you're eating, not just eating a bunch of empty calories, which is usually what McDonald's is, right? Just a lot of food, a lot of energy, very cheap. And because you're not using that energy, what ends up happening is that it turns into fat. So that's where fitness comes into play. And that's kind of why I have a profession as it stands. It's because I'm able to blend these two things together, put that into a product for somebody, and then hopefully get them from being overweight to fit, which is where most people want to be. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just to add something out there is you mentioned economics is huge. And I think that's kind of like one of the conspiracies that I was watching the other day. They want us fat because it's kind of like a domino effect. Like you mentioned also earlier, is being overweight actually increase it has some other effects and causes other diseases not related to fat, like diabetes, heart disease, a lot of other disease. And if you look into like the economics of health, health is a huge business, like huge, like massive. So,
I mean,
another
we haven't even touched on like pharmaceuticals, right? To treat the
exactly,
symptoms of being overweight.
right? Yeah. That, and also another thing too, one thing that I realized actually just now is that when you're healthy, when you're, more involved and just exercising, eating healthy, exercising, sleeping well, I think you think more. You're more mindful about a lot of things and you start asking questions and, learning, researching and just building things. So I think that's not good for, people, businesses. They don't want
Consumers,
they
being
want
consumers, right?
yeah, they want us to be consumers rather than creators. So I think that's another thing too. I think nah, I think being mindful is very important, but it all comes down with just being mindful about what you put in your body and also how you treat your body. I did get fat when I moved to this country, from Ecuador. When I was 13 years old, I remember McDonald's was the shit just because back in Ecuador, I didn't really eat junk food like that. And yeah, I gained weight. I was a little bit chubby. There's some pictures like, like more more
Pudgy
cachetes,
cheeks.
cheeks. Yeah, but I definitely did not struggle with being like super overweight. Because I was always active and I think Yeah, I'm curious about your experience because you've been in those shoes. Because I know like
Right.
obesity not only has health issues like physically, but also mentally. I think that's
Yeah,
another huge thing that huge effect that huge negative effect that it has in ourselves.
for
Thoughts?
sure. So like, especially when you're young, uh, self-image is everything, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of times where, especially if you're young, you will easily get bullied if you're somebody that's overweight. Um, we can get into like the psychological aspects of that, like why are people being bullies at such a young age towards people that are overweight? Um, or you can just go from the perspective of, kids being kids. You're different from them and you're significantly bigger than them. So, it can be a little intimidating or it can just be off-putting. So, people make fun of things that are different. Again, that's just like a whole racial issue, which I don't think we have time to get into regardless. Um, so yeah, like, there's all the physical issues, all the health issues. There's the mental health issues, right? Your perception of yourself and the way people perceive you, not feeling confident in who you are. I definitely dealt with that personally, right? At a young age, I was extremely overweight and I didn't really feel comfortable in my own skin. Like I didn't feel confident in who I was and what I was capable of doing. So, like that made me feel diminished. And I didn't do things simply because I didn't feel comfortable doing them. Which, over time I was able to get over that simply because I started getting into fitness and I started getting into wanting to be healthy. Um, for the first couple of years is for the vanity's sake, right? Like I wanted to lose the weight so I didn't look fat, and then at the same time I don't want to be made fun of, so let me lose the weight. But eventually it started turning more into just like a way of life, right? So going back to being more creative, being more thoughtful about your actions and your decisions. Like again, we live in a society that's just consumer based, right? Like businesses are literally developed just to make you consume products, right? Food being one of those things, technology being another thing. There's a lot of different things that we consume. But when you decide that you want to take a different approach with your health, right? So trying to be fit, you're forced to become somebody that's no longer a consumer. You have to be very decisive in the way you do things, right? Because I can either prepare the food that I'm going to eat to make sure I'm having healthy food, or I take my chances and I eat outside and hope for the best. Where
Hmm.
realistically, that's what most people do. And what ends up happening for most people is that they get very overweight relatively quickly. So that's all to put this together that being healthy and fit is important if you're somebody that wants to be kind of independent and have the ability to have more freedom. Um, when you're not, what ends up happening is that you just consume. You don't think about the reasons why you do these things, so it just becomes your default, right? And you fall into these routines, into these patterns, and then over time, that's when you start getting into the medications, right? You got to have this medication to treat the diabetes. You also have to take this medication because you're depressed, because of the fact that you are diabetic or overweight. You have heart conditions or metabolic issues, cardiovascular issues. So like all these things compound over time, and simply because you didn't want to, take the time to do the proper research and get fit, or
Hmm.
go to a gym, hire a personal trainer, hire my services. Um, simply like it goes such a long way, but it starts at such a small level. Like you don't really think that being fit is a such an important thing,
Hmm.
especially at the beginning, right? People just think that you're doing it just because you want to look better. And it becomes so much more when you do it for a long enough period of time, and you only really get there when you actually get involved into it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Absolutely agree on the last part that you mentioned about, you know, do getting fit on just being healthy, doing it for the wrong reasons versus doing it for you. And also it changes. It has a huge impact, believe it or not. That's why I always say when I go to the gym or like I'm eating healthy, it's not really because I want a six pack or I just want to look good. I think that's kind of like a perk and that just it calms. But if you do it for your health and just because that's the one thing that you can control in this life, like your health. how you live, how you take care of your body, of your mind. And I think it's important to take control on that. Now, one question that I have for you on this topic specifically is, you mentioned that, um, usually being uh, overweight, it used to be kind of like that odd. Now it's becoming a norm, becoming kind of like that norm, regular. So even like propaganda and clothing lines and stuff, they actually making models to do um just
Plus size.
plus size. Yeah, yes, yes, that's becoming more and more norm. So I have a question in that sense, that you think they're doing good or wrong on that aspect? I kind of have my personal intake on
Yeah, yeah.
it.
So it's see the whole premise of that concept is that you want to be inclusive, right? You want to be accepting of people, regardless of their shape or their gender or their race or whatever the case is. Like that's the idea. Like you want to include people that are on the heavier side, simply because if all you promote is health and fitness and skinny bodies or modeled bodies or six pack abs, all you're promoting is just people that are healthy and fit, and that doesn't include everybody, right? So that's um, maybe racist or what's the other word I'm looking for here?
Discrimination.
Discrimination. There you go. Right, like you're being discriminatory against people that aren't like you or don't want to be like you. Not everybody needs to be like you. Aside all that, Um, I definitely do think that it's not necessarily coming from a good place. Um, Again, on the surface, it's to be inclusive. And
Hmm.
again, like not everybody needs to be fit. I understand that. But not everybody needs to be overweight, right? And the idea here is that you need to find a good balance, right? Because now, like again, like you look in a commercial, and like they go from the thinnest girls to the heaviest girls, or they go from this like the most ripped guys in the commercial to like overweight dad bods,
Hmm.
right? Like it's a hard line to find. Like where do you become inclusive, and where does it start becoming like you're promoting unhealthy trends simply because you don't want to do the work? Or again, we go back to the consumer culture. You want people to just consume, right? So regardless, right, like these clothing lines, they'll promote you, or like the oversized models or the plus size models, just because they want you to be able to consume their content, right? You don't have to be fit in order to fit into our clothes. You can be overweight. It doesn't matter. Buy our clothes. Um, Again, like it's all falling in that consumer mindset and that consumer mentality. So no, I don't think it's 100% healthy. I think there's aspects there of inclusivity that you do want to incorporate, but I don't think that's like the narrative that is really like the main reason as to why that's being the thing.
Hmm. Yeah, on my personal intake on this is similar to yours. I think what these businesses are trying to promote is not necessarily healthy for everybody. Like I get it, like you're trying to be inclusive, you're trying to promote, like your clothing, and at the end of the day, they just want you to consume. But I think it, having kind of like a sense of, like the man or woman fit in their ads, you kind of put that propaganda in people's minds, saying like, oh shit, that's kind of like the peak. Okay, I don't have to look or be like that, but that's kind of like the norm. And now you have propaganda that's kind of like promoting overweight, promoting unhealthiness. And people, like you mentioned, are not gonna do the work, and that's gonna become the norm. And I see that going, to be honest. I feel like 10 to 20 years from now, we will see more and more overweight people. And unfortunately, that's, to be honest, that's just sad, because we're gonna see more people who are gonna be getting sick. There's gonna be, more people with more mental illness, because believe it or not, I think being overweight, it does cause some psychological damage as well, just like your picture. But actually, if you promote unhealthiness on your propaganda and that becomes the norm, that might change. But you know, but yeah, what can we do about it?
Honestly, again, be a role model. Do the better options, right? Be an independent thinker.
Mhm.
Again, we might be consuming this, right? But realistically, I've had this. This is I think, a 32-ounce water bottle, if I'm not mistaken. So, for
Balance.
every little sip I take of this, I'm taking like three or four of these. So I'm balancing it out, not because, like, I'm obviously I don't want to get drunk, but two, I want to stay hydrated so I feel good. I don't like this is supposed to be something to enjoy, not something that's supposed to control my life.
Mhm.
Similar when it comes to food, right? Again, food is one of the biggest addictions out there, simply because it's the one thing you can't live without. Like you can kick the alcohol, you can kick the nicotine, um, all the other drugs. Like it might be difficult, but you can kick it. Food is one of those things where you have to eat it in order to live. And if you have an addiction to food and you can't stop eating it, that's going to be very difficult.
Mhm.
So if you can beat that addiction, congratulations, you beat the pretty much the hardest addiction there is to beat. Um, from there, what I want to say is that again, the narrative is not always the norm, right? Like what you're seeing on the screens and you're seeing in the advertisements and all that, there's something there to the surface, right? Like you're just seeing the surface level, promotions of whatever things they want to promote. But usually it's going down into a deeper level of consumers, right? They want you to consume this content simply because it's going to make them money and it's going to take money away from you, or it's going to take life away from you. Or going back to what you were mentioning, right? Like you get overweight, you start getting on medication, you become depressed, so you take antidepressant medication. Like that's affecting two people there. That's
Mhm.
affecting the main person, right? The person taking on the medication. It's also affecting you, right? Because at the end of the day, if you live in a first world country, eventually you're gonna have to pay for that through Medicare or Medicaid, right? You're gonna have to pay for that through health insurance.
Mhm.
Um, at the end of the day, like it's important that we all collectively put in the effort to be healthy. Simply because if you don't, it's going to affect you negatively. And realistically, it's just not a healthy place to be. Um, Again, you don't want to be having issues where you have a family member or a friend that's dealing with these overweight or obese issues. It's always going to affect you, right? Like you can't do things with them, they can't do things. Um, Again, it really just depends on what the situation is, but sometimes people die at a relatively young age, right? Like there's people that die like their 50s or 60s due to the fact that they're extremely overweight and they're diabetic and or they have a bunch of heart conditions where on average most people should be living to about like 70, 80, if not 90. So, you take somebody away at a relatively young age. Like these are things that start affecting all of us in the long run. So it's really important that we as individuals take responsibility for our own health and fitness, start becoming more independent thinkers, have the healthier options, not because it's the better thing to do, but simply because it gives you power. Like you can make better choices, and then from there you can make even better choices and compound that over time, as opposed to just being a consumer stuck in the same cycle, and then eventually needing to move over into medication, and then that just makes the trend worse and worse long term. Right. So that's where I'm at with that.
That's very well put. Thank you. But yes, I agree with most of what you said. Actually, everything what you mentioned there. I think just leading by example is the way to go about this, not just because people who you're around or people that has you around will see you as the role model, especially if you have kids. I think, they tend to look at the parents like if my parents overweight, then I'm gonna be overweight as well. So leading by example, I think that's the way to go, not just because it's good for you and you're just gonna be healthy. I think it just puts you in like a more positive mindset. I think just being healthy overall. Once again, I always come back to this is the one thing that you can control about you, what you put in your body. what you're exercising, when you're exercising, when you're sleeping as well, because that's a huge factor. But if you can control that, you can start controlling everything around you, like, like your personal life, financial life, relationships. It's kind of like this compound thing that just keeps growing. So if you begin there,
It builds it builds a really good base, right? Like if you
yes,
can begin with your health and fitness, now you can stack on that. Now you can go to the next level. And then you can build on that. And you can progressively keep building until you really start creating the kind of life that you want. But
exactly.
usually, and you'll find it with most successful people, it begins with their health because that's the thing that they have control over.
Yep, exactly. I mean,
Mhm.
everybody's gonna die, and it's up to you to choose how do you want to live it. You want to be, free to move around, walk, travel, talk, experiment, experience, or you want to be in a bed, not doing anything and just getting fat, and it limits you. I think that's the word I was looking for. I think being overweight limits you, and believe it or not, it limits you to a lot of things because your confidence is down, your mental health is down, just your physical ability to do things, it limits you. So I think it's a huge limitation that you put in yourself, I think, because one has control about what we eat, what we consume, and whether we work out or not. So I will wrap it up there. Anything to add up?
Yep. That's it, man. So yeah, like fitness, I mean, not to be too cliche, but like fitness equals freedom, and being overweight is a limitation. So
Mhm.
that's something that you want to be considering. Like, what kind of life do you want to live? For
Yep.
me and for you as well, like we enjoy freedom. We like the ability to choose how we want to live it.
Hmm.
And obviously being overweight is not something that we like doing just because, again, internally and physically, it limits us. We can't do as much simply because one, our body's not capable of doing it, right? Like if you wanted to go hiking, you can't do that because you're overweight. Uh, or hey, you want to go to the beach and you take off your shirt and feel confident. I can't. I'm overweight. I don't like the way I look. Um, so yeah, like there's a lot of different ways we can go about this and we can take it. But again, like that's kind of like the premise of it. Like being fit gives you the freedom to live life the way you kind of want to. Not always, right? But it gives you more options. And then being overweight can become a limitation. Again, nothing is a straitjacket. Nothing is 100% true. Like there's people that are overweight and living life the way they want to. Good for them. But on average, that's usually not going to be the case. So let's follow more with the probabilities of if you're fit, you'll have a more freedom in your life to choose and do the things you want to do.
Yep. Well put. Cheers for that. Stay healthy, my friend.
Here's my friend. And now we take a shot.
This is a conversation between friends.
None of what is said here should be taken as legal advice.
We are not experts in any way.
Take what resonates and leave the rest.